Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back. This is Let the Record Show with Judge Richard Weinberg. That's me, Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, Eric Levine, noted lawyer and political commentator, and we're very privileged indeed to have Dr. James Hanley back from the Empire Center, senior analyst, an expert in energy and environmental issues. We've had Dr. Hanley on before. He's always enlightening and very important commentator on these issues. Dr. Hanley, welcome back. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's nice to be here today.
Well, you wrote this great column, and I want you to talk to our listeners about it. The name of your column was A Belated Reckoning as the Climate Act Costs Become Apparent. Would you please tell us what the message you were sending in that article and your view about what's going on in Albany in terms of the politics of changing the existing law?
Yeah, the consumer costs of the Climate Act have never been considered. Several members of the Climate Action Council wanted that, and Basil Sagos and Dorian Harris said no way. And now that the DEC is looking at the cost, Basil Sagos suddenly goes, oh my gosh, they could be extraordinary. And I think Hochul is, for the very first time, becoming aware of these costs. And she's in a bit of a panic because voters are going to be upset when these costs hit them in the pocketbook. And so she's trying to adjust the way we account for greenhouse gas emissions to a model that will actually it will reduce greenhouse gases less, but will bring down the cost of complying with the law. And the costs are considerable, aren't they, Dr. Hanley? Very considerable. I don't have exact numbers yet. I've foiled NYSERDA and the DEC to try to get their data so we can play around with it. But depending on how you count the methane emissions using the 20-year protocol or the 100-year protocol, it's almost double the count of methane emissions under the 20-year protocol, which means to get an 85% reduction, we'll have to cut a whole lot more. And the more you cut, the more it's going to cost. Is it correct that we're the only state that uses this 20-year methodology as opposed to the 100-year methodology? We are. The 100-year methodology was the one that was adopted in 1992 at the Kyoto Protocol, so it became the international standard. A lot of climate scientists argue that we should use a 20-year standard because if we don't, we're undercounting the effect of methane. And some others argue we should still be using the 100-year protocol because otherwise we undercount the effect of carbon, which doesn't warm as much as methane but lasts longer in the atmosphere. So for my take, it's really a matter of perspective. Are you focused on the very near term or are you focused on the very long term? And how concerned are you about the upfront cost of trying to take action? Well, and of course, consumers are very concerned about that. As they should be, because, look, these are the facts that we face in New York right now. 484,000 people have left the state of New York in the last year or so. A couple of million have left in the last 10 years. The economic base, we're losing some of the most productive people who create the jobs and pay the revenues that provide for all the services and the charitable contributions. We're losing a strong economic base. We should be doing everything we can to maintain the economic base. It's nice to be a true believer with respect to climate and environmental impacts, but you also have to make a livable place in the other sense as well, which is economic opportunity and personal freedom. Eric?
Yeah, so this is my question. This is what I don't quite understand. I think we can all agree there's climate change, and it's an issue that needs to be addressed. That's absolutely a fact. I happen to be one of those people who thinks that it's an open question, the degree to which man contributes to it. But let's assume for a moment man contributes 100% to it. John Kerry, at the recent Paris Accords, when we passed the Paris Accord or re-entered the Paris Accords, made the observation that if everybody does what they commit to do under the Paris Accords, it will not make an iota of difference in fighting climate change. Not an iota of difference. And why is that? Because China, India, the developing world have no interest in the climate agenda. So why are we bankrupting people to achieve a goal that is not achievable? Shouldn't we be directing our attention towards mitigation, carbon capture, without making ourselves weaker abroad and poorer at home? That would be my first question. And my second question is, we already have a solution. We have two solutions. We have natural gas and nuclear energy, neither of which have a carbon footprint or a de minimis carbon footprint at most. Those things are accessible to us. We have fracking. We have nuclear energy. We can solve the problem with existing technology, and yet those are not considered green energy. I don't understand why they are not considered green energy. So I'm wondering if you can answer the question, why do you think it's so imperative for the climate believers, or people who view climate change as a religion, to foist the climate agenda on us if it'll achieve nothing? And why, if we have solutions, won't they deem those solutions green and apply them?
Dr. Hanley, what's your view?
So you're right that developing countries, and particularly right now China and India, but add in sub-Saharan Africa if it ever gets really developing economically, they are more concerned about economic growth, about giving their people a higher standard of living, and the climate concerns come a distant second at best. But I think what is going on is people here believe that if New York sets a standard as kind of proof of concept, then everybody else will follow along. That's why they're so proud to talk about our nation-leading and world-leading goals. They think others will follow our lead. I think that's very doubtful, but that's their position. On your second question, a lot of people quibble with you on the effects of natural gas. It does have climate-warming effects, although it's much, much preferable to coal. It used to be called a bridge fuel, but now that we're standing in the middle of that bridge, people want to burn it down before we've crossed it. But I fully agree with you on nuclear, and I think New York should make itself a very welcoming place for experimentation with advanced nuclear power. We shouldn't be building the traditional type of nuclear power plants where each one is a brand new design, because those always go vastly over budget. But we should be making New York a welcoming place for experimenting with small modular reactors, which will be coming online by the end of the century. And that will give us a regular source of dependable, clean, non-emitting power.
Well, I want to just talk about electric cars for a second. I mean, in concept, electric car, that's great. It doesn't burn fossil fuels. But, of course, we have to mine minerals to make the batteries, and the strip mining, it destroys the environment. And most of those fuels and most of those minerals are in places like China and Afghanistan, which would be places we really don't want to be doing business with. But even more to the point, assuming we are able to make these electric cars cheaply and the supply chains aren't interrupted, you have to plug them in. You have to get the electricity to charge your electric car. And most of that electricity comes from coal, doesn't it?
Well, it depends what part of the country you're in, right? In New York, most of it's going to come from natural gas. In Illinois, a large portion of it's coming from nuclear. If you're in Indiana, most of it's coming from coal.
Where's it coming in California?
In California, it's coming from a mixture of nuclear, out-of-state coal, because they don't burn coal in California, but they happily burn it in Arizona and ship it in. And some hydro. It kind of varies depending on where you are in California. Burning coal is part of it.
And one final question. If oil is so awful and so evil, why do we want to import it from Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Venezuela, enemies of the United States? Why don't we just do it here where we do it much more cleanly and create some jobs?
For the same reason that President Biden wants us to use electric vehicles but doesn't want to prove lithium mines in the United States. We want to have it both ways, and we want to foist the problems off on other people because it's out of sight, out of mind.
Jesse, Jesse.
Dr. Hanley, thank you for joining us. I have just two questions. Number one, what are the projected costs? We've been hearing a bunch of numbers that the initial shock, sticker shock to consumers based on where their gas and home heating oils would be. And number two, how did this just show up? I mean, how did the DEC and Hochul not know about the costs of using the 20-year model versus the 100-year model, and it just arrived here late into the budget system?
Mm-hmm. On your second question there, it's possible the DEC knew ahead of time and was just playing politics with it, but I don't really know. It could be that they've just really been late in getting to an analysis of it. I've filed a Freedom of Information Law request from NYSERDA for any internal documents, and they told me they did not do any internal cost-benefit analysis. As I said, several members of the Climate Action Council wanted a consumer cost analysis, and Basil Sagos and Dorian Harris gave them a flat no on that. So it's possible the DEC has known all along, but it's also possible that they've just been dawdling on this and they just now started looking into it and got scared. As far as Hochul goes, I think she's just been too busy with other things to pay much attention, and this is probably the first time anybody's really made her aware of the cost, and I sent a shiver up her spine, I'm sure.
Well, I'll tell you what's interesting. From the political point of view, this is another example of Hochul being weak in the budget negotiations, because she raised the issue, and as soon as there's some pushback from the progressive wing of the Democratic caucus and the environmental religionists, she backed off right away. Jesse, what do you say about that?
She actually did. That was my third point I was going to raise, that when she announced this, she sounded the alarm on behalf of her administration. And I think it's late. And I honestly, when you're looking at these type of analysis, I mean, here in Suffolk County, I know the legislature there's a financial impact that goes with every piece of legislation, every program. How the DEC did not know or did not do a cost benefit analysis of this model is just beyond me. And maybe it's just typical bureaucratic government here in New York State that we've seen. But it does not show a political spine or political courage. She was at one point speaking on behalf of the consumers until 3 minutes later she got pushback from the progressives, and then she collapsed immediately. This is, and Dr. Hanley, once again, what are we looking at in terms of costs for gas here, for home heating oil? What are consumers faced with if this comes to be?
Well, all I know so far, until I get more information from the DEC, is what Basil Sagos said out loud, which is a potentially 62-cent a gallon increase in the price of gas.
Wow.
And 80% increase in the price of home heating oil or natural gas.
80% increase.
So how can people afford to live in the state of New York with those kinds of costs?
Because they'll ban gas
That's why
stoves. You don't have to use
They're
it.
leaving.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think people can afford that. And this is what has Hochul scared. There'll be tremendous political pushback once people start feeling the cost. I mean, you have to remember the benefits of fighting climate warming are going to occur way in the future. And it's mostly going to be things that don't happen, so people aren't going to really feel those effects. You don't notice a storm that never happens. But the costs are going to be felt up front, and they're going to be felt very directly, right in people's wallets. And that's a bad combination politically to say you're going to get charged a whole lot now, but don't worry, sometime in the future you'll get some really amorphous benefits.
I think
it could be that the benefits are worthwhile, but people aren't going to feel that way politically.
I think it's important for people to remember that during both the George W. Bush administration and the Trump administration, the United States both grew its GDP and reduced its carbon footprint, all because of capitalism, entrepreneurship, and American ingenuity. If we focus on private businesses and entrepreneurship, we can find solutions to these problems. It's when you have these top-down solutions, which really it's just a government takeover of the energy sector when we run into these kinds of problems.
Well, that's very interesting because I know Dr. Hanley is an expert on these issues, but he hasn't particularly studied the latest pronouncement from the Biden administration. But as a generic topic of discussion, let me tell you, the proposed regs coming out of EPA, which will force consumers to buy electric cars. And that's what they're intended to do. It's state control of economic decision-making. You will not have freedom of choice. They're going to force you with these rules to buy an electric car, even though the polls show that the vast majority of Americans do not want to have an electric car, notwithstanding the fact that there's good evidence that electric cars, as Eric points out, were dependent on China and Afghanistan for the resources. The batteries come out of China. The lithium and the cobalt come out of that area of the world. This is very serious business. Plus, these electric cars are not necessarily safe. In salt water, they explode. And if there's a breakdown, if there's a hurricane and there's a flooding, the cars can't move. This is very, very serious stuff. And when there's an emission from a fire, there's fumes that are toxic that go into the atmosphere. And the fire department in New York City has made it very, very clear, as the chief financial officer of the state of Florida has made it clear based on the Florida experience, when you have a fire or an explosion from one of these electric cars, guess what happens? They put it out, and it takes a long time to put it out, and then it spontaneously erupts again. So these are serious threats, and yet you have the Biden administration using the EPA to make choices that should be made in a capitalist system by individuals when they decide what kind of car they want. And this is very serious. And I would say to you, Dr. Hanley.
If I could add to that,
sure.
I'd say they're also not considering the cost impact on poorer consumers.
They don't care.
Nobody, your average person simply can't afford these electric vehicles. Someday an electric vehicle secondary used car market will develop, but nobody yet knows what that's going to look like, whether that will be a good cost-effective means for poor people. So it's really a punch in the face to your average lower-income person in this country.
Well, because it's primarily driven by wealthy white coastal elitists, people who can afford the cars and don't really care if the price of their heating oil goes up because they can afford it. Who cares about flyover country between New York and San Antonio? I mean, and Los Angeles. They care about San Antonio. I apologize to Texas.
Well, Dr. Hanley, I want to thank you once again for being on our show. It's now known as Let the Record Show, but it's the same people who brought you the Long Island Report, right. Chairman Jesse Garcia and Judge Richard Weinberg, and we're privileged to have you on the show again. Please study up on the EPA regs, because I'd love to bring you back for a more exhaustive commentary on that, because I'm very concerned about the central planning by the federal government using administrative regulations to make consumer choices.
I agree with you, especially the bureaucratic regulations as opposed to proper democratically decided decisions by our legislators.
All right. This is Let the Record Show. We will be back in a minute. Thanks again, Dr. Hanley.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And we'll be back for more interesting conversation in just a moment.